Hey, what up, docs? So we're going to be drawing a tree using lines. We're going to experiment with. We're going to experiment with different types of lines and different types of materials. We're going to be drawing a tree. The tree is just an opportunity to play around. Now, you're going to need tools for making lines, and it can be any or all of these things or other things too. You're going to need pencils, colored pencils, pens, markers, Cryamolts, and whatever else. So you can get wild with this. You can incorporate whatever you want. So round up your stuff. You're also going to need a paper or something to draw on. So get that stuff together. Today, you don't necessarily need to make a tree that looks like mine. It can look like whatever you want, but try to follow on, and hopefully I'll give you some ideas for types of lines to incorporate and how to structure your tree to some extent. But you can get funky with yours. Your tree can be whatever type of tree you want it to be. So let's get started. Okay? All right, cool.
John! Dang it! 2 times in a row!
All right, so we're going to do a little sketchbook practice today. And we're going to do a series of lessons kind of focusing on using different elements of art for your sketching work. So we're starting off today by talking about line. So for this, we're going to want just kind of a variety of drawing tools. Got a couple of things here. I've got this marker, got a fine tip and a broad tip, got a couple of regular old number 2 pencils, got some colored pencils, got some drawing pencils. This one is a 4H, which is going to be hard, and it's going to make it draw light. This is a 4B, and the B stands for black, so it's going to be soft, and it's going to draw dark. Colored pencil and a Sharpie here. All right. I also have a Uniball pen. I dropped this on the floor. So you don't need these exact materials. Whatever you've got is fine. You just want to have kind of an assortment. So we're going to start off with our number 2 pencil here. We're just going to be drawing a tree. So I feel like that's a good opportunity to experiment with line a little bit. So I'm going to just kind of bring it out here, start drawing around. So with your number 2 pencil, there's a couple of things you can do with any sort of wooden pencil. You can hold it so you're just using the point, and that'll usually do kind of a finer line and darker line. But for now, I'm going to hold this kind of using the side here. The side will give you kind of a broader, softer line. This is good for kind of shading and filling in larger areas, as well as getting just kind of a softer, gentler line. There's not really a specific way that we're going to worry about doing this today. You don't have to copy what I'm doing. You can kind of do your own thing. I've opened up my sketchbook. I'm going to be kind of working onto both pages here. Making this big. So the idea here is maybe this is where my tree is going to start. Bring it over here. The idea is we want it kind of thicker at the base here where it starts off. And then it's going to kind of gradually get thinner throughout the flow. And you can branch it off every once in a while as well. Make a series of branching lines. So we want to start off by drawing lightly. We're kind of thinking about following a process where maybe we sketch first, and then we go in and we get darker with the lines. So for that, we maybe want to kind of start light and then work our way towards getting darker. So we can think about that with the different drawing tools that we use as well. So drawing trees can be a little bit tricky. General idea, though, is that you want to kind of taper it from the base to the tip and have it thicker where it starts off here, and thinner as it kind of moves towards the end of the branches. And then when you feel like there's a good spot to kind of branch it off, create another branch, try that out. So I started with my regular pencil, but we can start with any other sort of lighter tool. So you could get in with your colored pencils and do the same thing. I'm going to be, as I go through this, really working with the idea of kind of using the colored pencil as a lighter sketching tool, and then using a darker pencil for the kind of finished line work. But you can also use a lighter graphite pencil, like just a regular pencil with a little less pressure. If you're just using one pencil, you can do lighter strokes with less pressure, darker strokes with more pressure, and maybe work the tip a little bit more. Or if you have drawing pencils, you can start with one of these as an H. So the higher the number on the H pencils, the softer it's going to be, and the lighter it's going to be. With the B pencils, the higher the number, the darker it's going to be, the blacker it's going to be. So yeah, the HB pencil here is kind of in the middle of that range. But the idea here is that you shouldn't be overly concerned with what materials you use for sketching. Your sketchbook should be like a place to experiment. So I would encourage you to try different things out and figure out what works for you. The huge advantage of kind of regular pencils or the drawing pencils is that they're erasable. But I think sometimes not being able to erase is good because it kind of encourages you to work with what you've got, figure out how to incorporate your mistakes or unintended movements into what you're doing. Like that idea of unintended movements rather than mistakes, because it's not always a terrible thing when we do something we didn't intend. And with art, I think that's the way you kind of make new discoveries and grow a lot of the time. You could switch it up, kind of get multiple colored pencils in here. This is another nice light one. This would be a great color for sketching things out with. But the main idea here is I want to kind of work light to dark. While I'm doing these lighter colors, I'm really just trying to get the general shape and layout of my tree here. So I would encourage you as you're doing this to kind of think about using the pencil in different ways. Like I said earlier, if we get kind of on the side, we can get kind of a broad stroke. This is nice for shading. So let's say I want to get some darker sort of accent lines throughout the trunk here. Use the side here, and it kind of gets a bigger shaded area, bigger, thicker line. The nice thing about using the side too is that when we go sideways, it makes kind of a thicker line. We go up and down, the line's thinner. So kind of mixing those, you can get some nice calligraphic lines happening like this. Get rid of that. Shouldn't worry about erasing too much. It's not a big deal. But then when you come in, if you want to get like details or like sharp contour lines, you can roll up onto the tip of the pencil and get kind of sharper lines like this. So with this kind of process, the idea is that we go in light first to kind of test and plan things out. And then we go in darker on top to kind of finalize what we've done. There's like a concept that I've seen running around social media lately. And the idea is make it first and then make it good. That's kind of what we're doing here. That's a really good way of putting what we're doing and sort of details in as you go. Stunts. Sort of similar idea if you want to use a pen. Kind of come in. Usually, if you're going to get a pen in here, you want to have a pretty clear idea of where you want to put everything first. So most of us would maybe want to sketch it out first, at least until you get very experienced and comfortable with using the pen. But again, it's nice to switch things up sometime. Nice to try out new things. Nice to see what works for you. One of the disadvantages to using a pencil all the time is that a lot of people use pencil. And so your work ends up kind of looking a lot like everybody else's. You start experimenting with different materials, kind of get different effects pretty quickly. So in order to kind of get a more unified drawing, when you switch materials, it might be a good idea to kind of work different areas with each or with the material. Put it away. You don't need to do the whole thing. I don't need to line like the whole tree with my pen. But maybe if I get into kind of different areas throughout, I can get an interesting effect going. Ultimately, what we would really like to do is get to the point where we're not thinking about what we're doing too much. Just kind of going with the flow. And enjoying the process. So, like, here's this guy. When young children first start drawing, they just kind of make marks on the page, right? And they're just delighted by Tool's ability to create a mark. And I think that right now would be a good time to kind of channel that. So I've got my brush pen here. This is a flexible tip that kind of simulates a brush. It bends a little bit. If you just apply very light pressure, you can get kind of a thinner line. If you apply heavier pressure, you can get something a little bit thicker. You might think about kind of adding darker texture to the bark here, or you might think about some shading if you're comfortable with that idea. So really, we're just kind of using the tree here as a structure for experimenting with line. We can represent the branches by drawing outlines, or we can just draw kind of thicker shapes and be branches as well. And this marker is kind of drying out a little bit. The ink's not coming out as well as it did when it was new, but that's kind of cool too. That can give an interesting effect. So having like a fun kind of wide selection of sketchbook materials that you can draw with in your sketchbook can be really good for discovering new things and experimenting. Even if they are maybe supplies that you wouldn't necessarily use for your more developed artwork anymore. Oftentimes they can find a place in your sketchbook kit. With the sketchbook, I think, the most important thing is to have materials you can take with you. It's really nice. But also things that are going to, be dry fairly quickly. Depending on what kind of paper you have in your sketchbook, it may or may not be super suitable to having wet materials on it. So you want to take that into consideration too. But a lot of the time you don't want to have like a wet piece that you have to leave out to dry for a long time in your sketchbook. That's not necessarily ideal. One of the things you might notice is your drawing as it becomes hard to talk. That's why I sometimes just babble, say incoherent things. But you can see, like, we kind of want to get a little bit of each material everywhere to kind of tie things together. Might even try crayons in your sketchbook. Crayons can be really cool because they're a little harder to control. So that can be good for loosening yourself up a little bit. And get a little pencil over here. Tie that in together. Feel like maybe I need more pen throughout. So it's looking a little isolated here. I decided to use the whole sketchbook. Partly so that it would kind of fill the screen as I record the video. But partly to encourage you to kind of be a little more expansive with your sketchbook drawing. Having it all spread out onto 2 sheets like this makes it like tricky to present as a finished piece. So maybe there's a little less pressure for me to feel like this needs to be something I need to show anybody else. I guess I'm showing all of you it. But you don't necessarily need to show yours to anybody else unless you want to. I hope it turns out so good that you want to show everybody. So things we're thinking about while we're drawing that we can kind of represent using our lines are like edges. I think that's the thing we mostly think about when we're drawing lines. But we can also think about texture and shadow. So once we are kind of comfortably drawing edges and texture and shadow, we're getting to the point where we have potentially pretty complete and realistic drawing. We have most of the elements of what we see when we look at something. Now, we have color as well, and we'll add that eventually, but in the beginning, kind of want to think about edges and texture and shadow. And I'm going to go back to my colored pencil here. So yeah, the tree shape usually kind of tapers and then branches. A lot of times with trees, you'll see kind of a downward curve to the branch where it's kind of drooping against gravity. So they don't always kind of go straight out. Sometimes you get a little bit of downward curve like this coming around. Maybe I'm going to bring this back here. I don't know. And go back in, add a little bit to this. You can see this kind of looks meh, you know? But then as I get in and I start building up and adding texture, it becomes a lot more interesting. I think that's a really important thing early on to kind of get used to is like, I think there's this idea with art that you magically do something right the first time and then it's done. But I think, especially kind of early on, it's really important to learn how to kind of not give up on a drawing and continue to push it. And again, that goes with that idea of make it first and then make it good, right? So I think a lot of people who have less experience with art think that you just make it good right away. But usually, it's not the way it works, at least not in the beginning. Some people get to the point where they can make it good right away pretty consistently. And it's amazing if you can do that and absolutely lovely. But not everybody gets there. I think even really accomplished artists sometimes don't reach that level. It's really more about like doing it right more often as you practice, and rarely about hitting a spot where you feel like everything is perfect. I think that's one of the enjoyable things about drawing and painting and doing art is that there's always room to grow. It's really hard to get where you want to get to. There's always things you want to do a little bit better. So if you like learning and improving and getting better at things, it's a really kind of lovely thing to practice, work on. All right, I think I need a little bit of my marker in here to tie this together. You can experiment with isolating your materials a little bit more if you want to try it, but I find to get a nice feeling of unity, a lot of times it's better to kind of get your materials a little more evenly distributed. Maybe we can add some pink here, some of that brown. Also, grabbed some crayons. You get to this point, you want to add some leaves. Put them on there. Just using a crayon. I've got a couple of different green crayons, and I think if I have a variety, it's gonna look a little better. So I've got a lighter green too. You might think about adding leaves, adding flowers, and some birds in here. I don't know. Just have fun with it, you know. I think like one of the best things you can do to make art more fun and enjoyable is to just try to relieve the pressure on yourself. It's not really a big deal. I think we take it very seriously, especially when we're starting out, especially if we're younger people. But I think it's a lot more enjoyable if you don't put too much pressure on yourself. Again, in a lot of ways, we're trying to kind of revert to that childlike state when things were just fun. We weren't super worried about whether they were good or what other people thought of them. Not only is that going to make it more enjoyable, but I think it'll help you progress, honestly, because there's a lot of things. Art goes through ugly phases, and that can be like your career as an artist. There will be times when you can't make anything that looks good or is pretty, and you have to push through it. You can't stop. If you stop, you don't get through that phase. But also in individual pieces, there will often be times when you're not happy with them, or they don't look good, or they're not pretty. Again, most of the time, if you stop, kind of limiting what you can do and how you can progress. Now, there's definitely a thing where you have to, at some point, figure out when something is finished and when to stop pushing. But especially early on, it's better not to worry about that too much. Get to the point where you ruined a couple by pushing them too far before you start worrying about pulling them back. Oh, let's see if I have a color is this. It's kind of a brown color. Oh, that's purple. Sometimes it's hard to tell what color the crayons are. It's a good purple, though. I don't mind that. Also, maybe experiment with holding your tools in different ways. If you grip it like this, you get kind of a lot of control. It's good for detail. But if you hold it a little more like this, it'll loosen up a little bit, especially when you're kind of doing your initial sketches. You're not worried about detail. That can give kind of a nice feel to what you're doing. Let you move around a little more expressively. Is there a good brand in there? Looks like another purple. Oh, here we go. Here's a nice brown. I think that having kind of a color variety in here helps make it a lot more interesting. That adds a little bit of texture to it. So even though we might not think about including purple in a tree trunk or pink or blue or lots of the colors we did, there might be a place for them. All right, so there's my tree. Does your tree look anything like mine? It doesn't have to. If it does, that's fine too. Doesn't matter at all. Just about kind of experimenting with different types of lines and seeing what we can do and experimenting with different types of tools. I got my Sharpie here too. Let's see. A little bit of Sharpie. I'm just going to do this Sharpie kind of places where it would be a little bit darker, maybe. Do a little bit of shadow with it, maybe. Since it's so dark and thick, I'm going to try to use it kind of sparingly. But if things are ever looking a little too kind of boring or samey, a little bit of contrast can help out a lot. But I'd say use it kind of sparingly, right? All right, so I think I'm going to call that good for today. But feel free to continue experimenting, trying out different kinds of lines. And like I said, you can add whatever you want to this. You can do leaves, flowers, birds, little birdhouse, do a little birdhouse city. Why not? I'm a sucker for the birdhouses. Birdhouse. All right. So yeah, I think that's gonna be enough time for this one. But if you got extra time, feel free to continue to mess around with yours. But I'm gonna call that the end of my lesson today. Next time, we're going to move on to kind of incorporating shapes and using those to draw things out. So I hope you learned at least a little bit about kind of different types of lines and different types of materials and how you can kind of use those in your sketch practice. All right, I will see you next time. I mean, I won't see you. I guess you'll see me. Anyway, have a good drawing time. Goodbye.